Strap on your earbuds, ladies and gents. You're listening to a full Monty version of Broken Boner Radio.
Don't feel down if you can't get it up. We all need to find the fun in being dysfunctional. It can be brutal if you've got a limp noodle. Getting hard is hard to do, but we're here for you. It's Broken Boner Radio.
Here's your host, Daniel Canfield.
My goal in our broadcasts and in putting our podcast together, I want to bring a slice of every piece of life to my program of Broken Boner Radio. And I'm excited today because a lot of people that have come and spoken on my program have erectile dysfunction. Some have penile implants like myself. But today I have Ted. I know Ted a little bit. He's what I would call a man's man. Honestly, in the few conversations we've had, I'm not sure you even qualify to say or would, if you even have erectile dysfunction. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Thank you for having me. Just a quick note. I think when you say erectile dysfunction, for me, I don't per se I've never had a performance, problem, but I do worry about it. It crosses my mind when the situation arises because I've had maybe a couple of instances where I didn't perform quite like the Superman that I think I am. And
how old are you, Ted?
45.
45. Okay.
So I do have that in the back of my mind. Like, okay, is this tonight going to be in that 1% of times where I'm going to have, a problem getting excited?
Right. You've never been married, correct?
Never.
What I know of you, for the listeners out there, you are the man's man. You seem to have everything. Money, great career, entrepreneur, very similar to myself in those respects. Good looking guy. I'm not hitting on you.
It's
but you turn heads when we've gone and had drinks a couple of times, and you've turned some ladies' heads. But to look at you from the outside, you are the manly man, the macho man. And where we differ is, especially for me, was I've lived my whole life with erectile dysfunction. So I was curious. We got into this conversation, and I don't even remember how it got there. I'm the voice of erectile dysfunction, and I want men to be able to talk about this shit man to man. Look in the mirror and talk man to man with yourself about this shit. Do you recall how this topic even came up?
Not specifically, but we were probably talking about my dating adventures. And I think I was asking you, about your situation, of marriage. And I think, you told me that, you'd been, married twice and that basically those were, your only partners. And, it kind of blew my mind because, having been single.
Well, that's not quite accurate. Those are my only partners. I did have a single life.
Right. But, over the last, I don't know how many years, but
12 in my first marriage.
Right.
It'll be 20 years this year.
And then I remember, we did speak a little bit about your single years and some of your adventures. I think for me, I wonder sometimes if I would have a different outlook on relationships, if I did per se have erectile dysfunction, other than, how I feel now. I could go meet a girl tonight at happy hour and have no doubt in my mind that I could either go back to my place or her place and make it happen. No doubt.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because other podcast I interviewed my son Ryan, who's 30, and he happens to have the same erectile dysfunction condition that I have. And we were talking during the interview about how that has affected us as young men when we were single, of even approaching ladies or because there's in the back of our mind, it's like, oh, fuck, I'm hot, she's hot. I'm not saying I was hot looking, but I'm viscerally excited. She's hot. Let's make this happen. But and Ryan concurred in both of our situations. It was like, nah, not going to ask for the digits. Not going to go there.
Well, because you're going to put in the work and not receive any fruits for your labor.
Exactly. I found it interesting. And again, I'm excited to bring different people, men, women, from different facets of life and different perspectives of sexuality and marriage or being single. You mentioned once you have no desire to get married, correct?
I would say it would be less than 1%.
Okay. And so your sexuality is really just enjoying being a single guy with a big hard cock and right? I mean, that's kind of what you're
I enjoy the newness of relationships, in the beginning when there's that, almost unbridled passion where, everything is new. You're discovering things about each other, what makes the other person excited, what turns them on, and just the newness of getting excited to see that person, you just think about them, like, hey, they're going to be here in 15 minutes at my house, and you're just excited about just seeing them, and you're going to be sexually excited because you're attracted to them. Whereas for me, when I'm in a relationship, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it takes 3 months before I lose that. And once I lose it, I can't get it back, it seems like. I try, but once I lose that spark, for me, it's gone and it's time to move on to the next relationship or take a break.
wow, okay. And there's a lot of people out there just like you, women and men, as I've met and interviewed a lot of different people now. So no judgment there. I mean, this all comes in all different shapes and sizes. But when you say you lose it, do you mean you lose the sexuality part of it? You have a harder time getting aroused, getting an erection?
Right. In the beginning, generally, when I first start dating someone, if, her and I are even touching each other, maybe on the couch watching TV, I might start to get a little aroused. Definitely, if we start kissing, I definitely become fully aroused and, I'm ready to go. Whereas, sometimes a month or 2 months or 3 months into the relationship, that doesn't happen until we get right down to the brass tacks and we're naked and going through foreplay. And sometimes I've noticed that the longer I'm in a relationship, then once I hit that point where it starts taking me longer and longer to get fully erect. Now, I will always get fully erect, but
I'm so jealous.
well, it's for me, it's I think about the interest, and it's got to be psychological because it's the same pattern over and over and over. I'll be honest, I've had, people, friends close to me say, "Well, why don't you, go get some counseling and find out what's causing that?" Because and I always tell them because I don't care. That's my lifestyle. And unless you're a very religious person or judgmental person about other people and you think that that lifestyle is somehow bad or I don't know,
Immoral.
immoral,
You
you
have no
know
heart.
we get to live one time, and if you can't figure out what makes you happy yourself and you can't pursue that path, you're not going to live a very fulfilled and happy life. And my goal is to live the most fulfilled life that I can because I know that I only get one shot.
Right. And I applaud you for that. And again, I judge no one. My goal is to bring people from all different frames of mind. I'm sure you've probably met and been with women who think very much like you do. Have you ever had a woman kind of like lose her interest before you lost yours? I mean, they don't have either an erect or a flaccid penis to, judge by, but, have you had that happen to a woman that you've been with?
Maybe, I would say if I had to count, I've, dated and had sexual relations with, well over 100 women and maybe one or two. I mean, I've never had a girl break up with me. And I think that's mostly because for me, I've always made it a point to be good at sex. It's kind of like anything I do, I want to be good at it. And whether it's when I'm going to the gym, I'm all in. I'm eating right, I'm working out, and I'm trying to figure out the way to maximize every single thing. And I always think,
What are you
that's
doing, curls with your cock?
no, but
I
like
mean,
I
are you up to 5 or 10 pounds now?
But, like I told you before, when I first started experimenting with Viagra or
Yeah,
Cialis,
we're going to talk about their stud muffin.
and that to me was a way to maximize my performance. Not only the pleasure for both of us, but for me, it took me from what I thought I was already, great. It made me a superstar. And for me, I think once, I'm in a relationship with someone, and if I use that in the beginning, then of course, then they're going to think, wow, this guy's amazing, or at least in my mind, I think they're thinking that.
No.
Eh,
Okay.
you know,
So that blew me away when we were talking, getting to know each other. And he says, "Yeah, I started using Viagra." I'm like, "Holy fuck!" There's so many men out there that are like you. I think that really don't have a problem, at least no apparent signs of oncoming erectile dysfunction, anything like that. But they take Viagra anyway, and it's like, whoa.
I look at it like anything. It's a performance enhancer, just like if you were on steroids or, if you were going to the gym or look at Barry Bonds, look at what a great baseball player he was before he took
Yeah,
steroids. And then look what it created a monster. I mean, he became this almost unbelievable baseball player that, the world never even thought would exist.
right.
And, so to me, I look at it the same way. If I take Viagra or Cialis, it's just going to take my talent level where I'm at and make it that much higher.
Hmm. So I remember you mentioning to me, refresh my memory. You said you've done Viagra. How many years have you been taking Viagra now, roughly?
I think since about 1998 or 99,
So that's almost 8, 9 years.
but it was very sporadic because I dated this nurse that lived about 45 minutes away from me. The first time her and I had sex, she said, hold on a second, I'll be right back. I was a little confused,
Oh, she
and
said that.
she said that. And I said, what in the heck, where is she going? I was fully hard, and we're about to, make it happen. We're both going at it like animals.
You're lucky she didn't go put a strap-on on.
I was worried. That crossed my mind. And I was looking for the exits. And she comes back with, a glass of water and this pill in her hand.
Oh, okay.
And she said, take this. And I said, what is it? I don't take drugs. And she said, no, dummy. She said, it's Viagra. And I started laughing. I said, look down here. Do I look like I need Viagra? And she said, shut up and just take it.
So this is the first time that you've tried that. That was
That
the
was
first time?
that was my first time that I ever tried
Oh,
Viagra, and it was given to me almost forcibly by the girl I was dating, and she took one also.
whoa, okay.
Yes, and she said it just made the sex more enjoyable for her. And obviously, I didn't really know how Viagra worked back then, but I mean, obviously, I think even now they have a prescription version for women. And I
Yeah,
mean,
it's Addy.
obviously,
It's a completely different chemical makeup than Viagra. It works completely differently on women, and that's a legit. Dr. Goldstein, my medical expert on the site.
but I wonder if for her it just created more blood flow to her genital region like it does for us men, and thus made it, more enjoyable for her. But she was pretty much self-professed nymphomaniac size queen.
Perfection met perfection.
Right. So the sex was great. We were not compatible relationship wise, but she had a great outgoing personality, and
And where can the listeners find the videos?
I hope nowhere.
You're
I
making me hot just thinking about it. I was
sh-
like, geez.
she was an animal, and but I'm sure I wasn't the only partner she had.
Well, and how was it? Did you go, oh my God, yeah, here I am with a big
Wow.
boner, and it went bigger boner, or
It was for me, I would always get really, really erect very hard. And it made it even harder. I think it probably added, a half inch in length, and it added probably, maybe a quarter inch in girth, because I mean, it was so hard that it almost hurt, like the skin was stretched so far. And we had like a marathon 2-hour session. And literally, I probably lost 5 or 7 pounds because I was sweating so profusely. And she would not let me stop. And I
like I
remember,
said, there's men and women out there. It's a crazy world out there.
Well, you never know. I mean, when you meet someone, that is part of what gets me excited about being single and constantly meeting new people and starting new relationships is that discovery period, of excitement and learning.
Now you had mentioned after you'd been in relationships for a while, you kind of lose the buzz, lose the turn on. Did you when you started using? Did you start using Viagra more recreationally? I would assume after that.
After that, then I had to, of course, find out where I could get some. And because,
Now,
once I
what did you
stopped,
do? How'd you do that?
I started asking around to some of my buddies, like, hey, have you ever tried, but you got to remember at the time I was probably 28, 29, and so were my friends, and they were all, no way, no. And
We
most of
don't need
them,
that shit.
well, and right, the guys that were in serious relationships, didn't, but they wanted some. After I told them my some of my experiences, they were like dying. Please get me some. And so I went online and I found some overseas generic versions of the drug, which they say can be dangerous to order it from these overseas places, but
It can.
it can be
Dr.
dangerous
Goldstein
to
has
eat at
told me
fast food
stories.
restaurants too. But
Yeah.
we roll the dice. I've never had a bad experience, and I've ordered, online overseas many, 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 many times
I have
since
to
then.
say, I don't condone that. Dr. Goldstein has shared stories with me where he's known of men who've died from taking something, off the internet like that because it had bad shit in it. And
True. I mean, the website that I get mine from now, I've ordered from them for over 10 years. Same exact place.
so I can't condone this for the listeners because, again, Viagra, in the beginnings of it, was a heart medication. And when they were testing it and the results they were getting, they were giving it as a heart medicine to these guys in testing and they were getting erections. And then the study went, well, wait a minute. This is helping better with giving our test subjects erections. I don't know if lab rats got erections from it. I don't know if they tested it that way, but they turned the research around and developed it as an erection medicine. But it can be dangerous for people with heart conditions. And that's the scary part when you're not doing this under a doctor's care is, some men could be taking this and they've got a heart condition that maybe they don't even know about. So I'm not a doctor, but I do know, you know, it's better to walk into a doctor's office and say, hey, I think I'm suffering from erectile dysfunction.
Even if you have to lie about it, rather and get a real prescription rather than ordering
Well,
over
at
the
least you're
internet.
under a doctor's care. And
Right.
and I'm, one of the deeper narratives that I love to talk about is why is so much emphasis wrapped around how big, how thick, how hard our dicks are, and how long it stays hard as a definitive part of our masculinity. It's part of what I want to talk more about with more men. And you and I've gotten into these discussions too. It's life doesn't have to be just that, especially in a relationship or even in if it's just a sexual relationship. There's so much more to that than just pitching the high hard one as as like throwing a fastball as fast as you can throw it. And but that's not for everybody. And I'm not here to judge. People just want to have sex. They're a heartbeat on this planet just like everyone else. I have no judgment about that. But so your use of Viagra, I remember, if you don't mind me sharing this, you're at a place now, you've been taking it like you said 8, 9 years. You're afraid not to use it, or you
Now I'm in a place where I know for sure that I don't need it, especially if it's a new relationship, because I'm going to be so excited about the person that I'm dating and just, her being so new to me is going to excite me and I'm going to get, an erection without a problem. But I do try to keep one with me just in case. I guess one of the insecurities as you get older as a man, is the refraction period, I think they call it, the time between erections. If you have a sexual encounter, at 11 o'clock p.m. that lasts till 11:30, the older you get, when I was 20 years old, it would stay hard. I mean, literally, I would, there would be no refraction period. At 30 years old, there might be 15 minutes. At 40, you start getting to the point you're like, well, I'm good. Well, why should I go for round two? It's time to go to sleep.
right,
See
right.
you in the morning. But that is one of the insecurities. And I think the other part of it is okay, if I did use Viagra the first time, my new partner and I had sex, then she's going to expect that same level of erection, performance, virility. I mean,
Now,
and
is that a self-imposed? Are you thinking for her, thinking, well, that because you just said she's probably going to want it the same way. Have you had women actually express that, or is that just you assuming because it's like
no,
it's
I,
like two halves of a basketball game. Well, we should, the Warriors, shot lights out in the first half, therefore they're going to shoot lights out in the second half, or at least they better because they're professionals.
or they think they've got to win with offense instead of with
Right.
defense,
Right.
and I think a lot of it is obviously this self-image that, I have of myself with that. I think we all have a different identity. Every relationship is based on a little bit of different, some relationships are definitely more sexual, some are more companion related. For me, I feel like I'm gonna have to live up to that same expectation, that performance, and in my mind, I think she expects that, I guess.
How do you feel living? Because what I hear is like that's an immense pressure.
Oh, it's a deep, it's a lot of pressure, and
So
there
how do
are
you feel about that? Tell me your feelings behind that.
it's probably a self-imposed pressure because there are a lot of days, even when I am dating someone, that, she might send me a text message, hey, you want to hang out and watch a movie at your house tonight? And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, oh, she's going to want to have sex. I had a long day. Maybe I only slept 5 hours last night and I played golf all day, or I did something that really drained me. And the thought of having to have this Olympic style porn sexual escapade for an hour just makes me dread it, then because I think,
Wow.
okay, if I can't do it like that, I just don't want to do it at all. And I don't want to disappoint her. So I just make up a lie and say, no, I've got to work on a business project tonight or something and, blow her off.
So hang on a second. So let me wrap my brain around this. So you would blow off going over to a lady's house because in your head it was like, if this gets, I'm not feeling like I want to get sexual about this, or you may not be able to. And so you actually like forego the companionship, the cuddling, the maybe just the soft petting kind of thing, just because you didn't feel like you were up to having the full blown, throwing the 90-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah. I've had situations where maybe if I, first started dating someone, maybe in the first couple of weeks, and maybe the first time I did have sex with her, I did use a performance enhancer, Viagra or Cialis. And of course, had some Olympic style porn sex, and maybe even done that the first 2, 3, 4, 5 times we had sex. And then, once you start breaking into the routines of dating, maybe just hanging out instead of going out and dinner and movies and comedy clubs, maybe you're just hanging out at home watching a movie on the couch. There are certain days that I might, you know, blow off, my new date because maybe she wants to come over and watch a movie, and I maybe had a long day, and I don't feel like I can quite perform at that level that maybe I think she expects. I might,
Well, I can't speak to that, from my experiences, because, I was suffering erectile dysfunction. But on a deeper conversation, the deeper narrative, what kept you from just being right up front about that and saying, hey, I've had a long day. I'd love to just have you over. You know, can we not have the expectation of sex? Could those words have ever crossed your lips, or a conversation like that?
I would have a hard time saying that without laughing. Just because, in my mind, the man is supposed to be the man. And I think, I know as I've gotten older at 45, there's always this stigma that the men always want sex. Men are, we're just animals. We're just,
That's the socializing I always talk about
right.
when I talk. It's we're just taught this from birth. It's like,
And it's not true. I mean, from all of my relationships, I can pretty much say 90% of them, the girl has wanted to have sex way more than I did. For me, When I was younger, I used to say, gosh, if my wife or girlfriend didn't have sex with me every day, I'd dump them. That was when I was young and dumb. Now I'm the opposite. If I had a girl, and I have had them and I have dumped them, that just, wanted to have sex 3 times a day, every single time we were together, even after we've been dating, for a month or two, it's just too much. It's too much, for me, a lot of it is there's a lot more that goes into sex physically for a man than for a woman. You have to be not only mentally into it, you have to be physically prepared
Right.
to perform. And, I feel like for myself, sometimes, everyone is their own worst enemy. And, by doing some things that I probably do in the beginning of the relationship, like have, porn style Olympic sex the first few times that we're together, it sets the bar pretty high, and there's only one way to go after that, and it's down. And I remember probably my last serious girlfriend, the sex was unbelievable. And I remember we eventually moved in together. And one night, after a pretty long, intense session, she said, wow, do you think our sex life will ever, get boring? Or she said, it's so amazing. I can't believe how good it is. Do you think it'll ever, deteriorate? And I remember laying there thinking immediately in my mind, I was saying, of course, absolutely, I think that. But of course, I said, no, of course it won't. I couldn't, at that, especially at that moment, and say, well, but yeah, it probably will get old and I'll get bored of you and leave. And that's basically what happened. But
Yeah, that's one of those tricky questions that well, and we ask them of women too. I mean, let's not bullshit ourselves. I
right,
mean, we as both sexes have ways of asking questions that there's not a good answer to, except bald-faced lying.
right. And, if you tell the truth, you're an asshole. If you lie, you're an asshole. So,
Right.
it's just to keep the peace. Sometimes it's easier to just tell a lie, which, it's just, we're humans.
So, can you see a world? I mean, and you can help me reach men like you and reach women. How can we get around what I would love? Part of my passion is to try to come up with a way, some communication skills to where we can kind of drop the bullshit about some of this stuff. I mean, would life have been better for you had you had a set of tools to be able to communicate clearly, one, what you're feeling, what you're truly feeling, and what you'd really prefer, but also at the same time not feel like a schmutz, not feel like a less than masculine man, or come across as a pussy to your girl. Can we get there? Can you? Because that's my passion. That's what I want to try and help. People from all different walks of life.
I think you can get there. I think it's difficult. I think, like I might have told you before, my first, I guess, I guess my first sexual education episodes were watching porn. So to me, that was quote normal. The way people have sex in porn movies.
That was
I
the
mean,
standard. That's what you
that
were
was
supposed to live up to.
that's what I was trying to live up to from the time I was, 16, 15 years old when I first started, experimenting sexually. And, I would watch these pornos and I would say, okay, I've got to work on my stamina. I've got to be able to go. I've got to be able to, and I've even, I get a little bit verbal and, and I can get a little, crass during sex, and
Hey,
I'm
some
not
women like
afraid.
that. Talk dirty to
Some
me.
Absolutely, but I have had a couple of girlfriends that maybe a month or two after we were dating, have said, hey, can I tell you something? And I say, of course. And they'll say, you kind of scared me the first time we had sex, because, I'm pulling their hair and calling them dirty names and,
Is
and,
this with or has Viagra changed your vernacular? Like, are you more aggressive when you're on Viagra? Does it affect you that way at all?
I don't know.
Or is
I
that
mean, I
just
know.
you?
I think that's just me. I'm
That's
just,
just Ted.
I'm aggressive by nature.
Okay.
I'm a pretty straight shooter. People either love me or hate me. And I like it that way because I don't want to ever have to guess if someone likes me. I mean, I'd rather just know that, hey, this person likes me and this person doesn't. I'd rather not associate with people that are in the middle. I just don't have time. I mean, your time is limited. Why waste it with people that don't want to spend time with you?
Wow.
Because they don't have the nerve to tell you that. And
Well,
that's sort of why I end relationships because I'm not one of those people to sit there and just the first time I dread my girlfriend coming over just because I don't even want to talk to her, have like, I don't know, that sense of, I'd rather be doing something else. I've learned, I just tell them, look, it's not working for me. And you're a good person. Good luck to you. And let's both just move on.
well, I really want to honor you for being so transparent about that. And I realize there's probably listeners out there, men and women, that are probably like driving off the highway going, I can't believe he just said that. But seriously, everyone out there, if I am looking for answers and I'm looking for ways to craft the tools to help people communicate and get over some of this stuff and work with it and deal with it and talk about erectile dysfunction or talking about there's too much pressure about having sex. How can we communicate about that without first feeling like a mouse as a man or being a bitch as a woman? And if anybody out there has ideas or they want to speak up, communicate with me through my website at danielcanfield.com and send a message through Let's Talk, or you can reach me through the podcast here. We've got the phone number at the end of the segment. You can call in and ask questions or make comments about. I really want to hear from all of you. That's what this platform's for, is to give everybody, people suffering erectile dysfunction, people like Ted here that, there's some uncomfortable situations. I want to change the dialogue about how we talk about sex and whether we do have sex or hard sex or soft sex or sex at all. And to me, that's the more interesting, deeper narrative of this whole thing. So I really encourage everybody to be a part of this movement with me. Ted, I was curious too. Okay, you're 40, what'd you say, 45?
45.
Okay, and I remember us talking about you're starting to go through some health changes. You're in great shape. You're a guy that works out a lot all the time. Like I said, women see you, they're a stud. They're like, oh, who's he? I've been with you. I've seen it happen. So I'm curious, you had mentioned about you've gone and gotten blood work done, checking on your health. And I commend you for that because most men are total pussies when it comes to checking on their own health. And what did you go through? What have you been doing? What did you discover about your basic health?
Well, I mean, I noticed for me when I turned 40, I just pretty much lost general interest in all the things that I loved: sex, golf, working out. I just had a general lack of ambition. And, I even used to love to work. And at that point, I was just working because I had to make money. And, you should never work just to make money. I mean, I know a lot of people have to, and we all do at certain points, but, it's what you want to eventually, get to the point where you have a passion for something, and that's why you do it. And if you happen to get paid for that, then that's great. And for me, I just lost all my zest. And so I decided to, get some blood work done. And of course, my test levels were mega low.
Your testosterone levels?
Yes, my testosterone levels were super low.
We had that in common. I went through the same thing a little later. I was in my late 40s, early 50s.
Well, and I think there's no symptom. You don't get a cough. It's not like you get a rash. It creeps up on you. It's like driving your car, and as long as there's gas in there, you're driving. And you don't notice, it doesn't drive any different when the gas level is going down as when it was full. And until the thing starts sputtering and you're sitting on the side of the road, then you say, well, I wonder if I have low fuel.
So the sputtering for you was your lack of interest in all the things that you used to love to do, your physical activity dropping off, or feeling like you even wanted to get out and do it.
Right. I used to wake up every day and feel like, an animal. I used to feel like, okay, this is my world. Everyone else is living in it. I'm going to go out today. I'm going to make money. I'm going to figure out who I'm going on a date with tonight, and I'm going to just tackle the world. And I think that is something that I lost, and I still haven't gotten it all the way back, but just recently started, supplementing with testosterone, and I definitely feel I'm on the way back to being, I guess, quote myself, whatever that
You
is,
feel a significant difference, and you're doing this under a doctor's care. You went to a clinic and they tested you and found that your
Absolutely.
testosterone level. What was your testosterone level when you went in?
I believe it was 213,
Wow. Yeah,
very
that's
low.
now my doctor, when I had mine checked a few years ago, my regular doctor looked at mine and mine was like 240 something. And he says, well, I can't remember the exact number, but he goes, oh, that's his comment to me. And it didn't show me the chart at all. It didn't show me my, I forget what you call it, but the numbers. And he goes, yeah, it's average for a man your age. And I was probably 60, 59, maybe 58. And he told me, well, it's average for a man your age. When I went to Dr. Goldstein, my sexual specialist, he did my blood work and he said, what did your doctor tell you? I said, normal for a man my age. And he's like, holy cow. He goes, he got a little upset actually because the range, and that's where I learned. He's teaching me, he taught me about what I've now coined the term on our website, the manly numbers. And I've learned that testosterone levels, the low is in the upper 200s and it goes all the way up to 900. When you're in your puberty years, you actually soar off into the 1100, 12, 1300 level. That's when you dry hump your neighborhood pet.
That
But
sounds fun.
you remember those days, right? I don't,
Yes, I,
because
I
that didn't
miss I
happen.
miss those days.
That didn't happen to me, but it wasn't because my testosterone levels were low, as I had this erectile dysfunction problem. But anyway, that's he taught me those numbers, and he put me on testosterone injections, and my testosterone level now I go get a blood test every 3 to 6 months just to see where my numbers are. I want to know. And I make the analogy, and again, it's on our website about the thing about manly numbers. We take better care of our cars than we take care of ourselves. And manly numbers are very much like watching the tire pressure in your tires, the oil level in your car. Men will typically check all that stuff. You need to go get a blood test, a simple blood test, and have some of these numbers checked periodically. So you found the same thing. You were at 213.
Yes, and I could feel it. I mean, I didn't know why I was feeling that way, and I didn't, I guess I'm a little more, I guess I would call progressive when it comes to health issues. I mean, I'm not afraid to go to the doctor and say, "Hey, I'm feeling this certain
Well,
way,"
you're
or
not like most of the men I talk to. Have a doctor stick his finger in my ass? Fuck no. I'm
you
like,
know, you
dudes.
don't want to, but would you rather die of prostate cancer?
Exactly.
You have to, I have a buddy of mine right now that, he's going through some health issues and, he was a little bit embarrassed because he has to go get a colonoscopy next week. And he said his number one worry is that there's going to be some hot nurse that's going to tell him to bend over so she can stick this tube up his crack.
And he's going to like it just a little too much.
And that, well,
I joke
he
with
might.
guys. I joke with guys all the time. If you've got to go get a doctor stick his finger up your ass, when you get in there and he gets you bent over, back into his hand. Act like
Oh
you
my
want it, and
gosh.
they'll do their job, but they're not going to linger. And
That is funny. Well, I asked my buddy if he was going to get a Brazilian wax before he went. And this is a big, big guy, a big, sort of, I wouldn't say hairy, but he's a big kind of semi-hairy guy. And so I thought it was
well,
funny.
it's crazy. Dr. Goldstein talks about this, and again, there's things on our website about your testosterone levels. Another huge part of what I call the manly numbers is your hormones that are secreted from your thyroid, your T4 and T3 levels. Those were the first numbers for me that dropped off the charts way before my testosterone ever gave me a problem. Every symptom you just talked about hit me. I was probably late 40s, early 50s. Same thing. I was working out at the gym all the time, had a life on a string, and I love to play golf all the time. And pretty soon I just like, oh man, I lost interest. It was psychological too. I mean, I got kind of depressed, and I went in for my annual exam to my regular doctor, and he looked at my blood work and he goes, "Oh, Daniel," he goes, your thyroid's shot. You've got hypothyroidism." I said, "Fuck, I'd never heard of that." I'm like, "What, am I going to die? Is it like cancer?" And he goes, "No, no." He goes, "Your thyroid's not producing enough of these hormones, and those particular hormones really affect your well-being and how you feel." And I said, "Oh, wow." I said, "Okay, so what's the deal?" And he goes, "Well, I'm going to prescribe you this little pill. It's lavoxotyrene. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but I take a pill every morning. And within about 3 weeks, I felt a complete turnaround in my energy level. My brain was getting cloudy before, and it started to clear up. I started to function better. I started to feel more sexual. I started to feel better about life, my job. I started playing golf again. I got back to the gym and got in the best shape of my life, better than when I, was really ripping it before my thyroid gave out. All a little pill that I take every morning, and I'll take them the rest of my years. How long did it take when you started your testosterone treatments? And there's different types. You do injections, or do you do the under the arm or the salve on the arm stuff? Which one do you do?
I do the injections. They give me the preloaded syringes,
Okay.
and I do the injections. But I probably didn't notice a difference until about a month, and then I went back and got another blood test, and my levels had gone up to somewhere in the fours.
Okay.
And, I'm not sure where they're at right now. I'm probably due in a few more weeks to go back and check. And, I'm not sure what I even want my levels to be at, but I know I would love to feel like I did at, 28, 29. I was, an animal.
Well, that's all the part of getting older. And that's another thing about erectile dysfunction. And, you could end up someday facing a decreased ability to maintain an erection, because it's just, so for some guys, it's just a matter of the condition I have is degenerative, and it can strike a lot of men later in life. Not to give you bad news, but the good news is there's help out there. There's all sorts of things you can do to still be sexual, be functional, and all of that. So that's the good news.
Well, that is the good news. And I think a lot of people are not aware. I mean, I consider myself pretty aware when it comes to health and the options out there for certain, disabilities or certain dysfunctions. And, I know when you and I talked, I wasn't aware that, I was going to have an option later in life other than Viagra or Cialis. I pretty much thought that was I'd heard about people maybe doing penile injections or using pumps, but I guess in my mind, I thought some of that might be just kind of a myth.
Were
Or
you shocked when I disclosed that I had a penile implant?
I
What did you
thought
think?
you might have been pulling my leg a little bit at first, and I didn't know how to take it. I was trying to read you to see if you were serious, and then when I figured out you were serious, I said, "Oh my gosh!" And soon as we were done talking, I went and got on my computer, and I spent about 2 or 3 hours.
Really? Oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah, and I was excited about the fact because I thought, well, hey, I'm above average in size, both length and width or thickness, whatever you want to call it. And
Okay, I can
I
hear the
thought,
phone ringing right now. Women are calling in, going, "What's this Ted's guy's number? What?"
but I thought, hey, I can go from being an all-star into being a Hall of Famer if I can get one of these XXL pumps installed, and
Oh, okay. Now you need to understand something about penile implants, and a lot of people don't understand this. And this is, I have to admit, it was one of the really stupid fucking questions I asked my doctor and his staff when I went to Dr. Goldstein's was, "Is this like women's breast implants? Can I go from the size I am to a little bit bigger girth and length?" And he laughed because I get that question all the time. And right now the technology is not really. They can only put the implant in that's the size of what you were. So you can't go from the 6 inch to the 9 inch Mondo size like women can with their breast
I was
implants,
thinking
unfortunately.
12. That was my
Well, hey,
goal.
well, if you're already 9 or 10, I understand. I haven't seen him, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't seen him, but I've only heard the stories.
But it can be a detriment. And, even at, like I said, I'm just, I consider myself just, I'm above average. And it can't, it's a man thing again. Women, I generally, if, don't think it's a big deal to them, and to maybe a few. But like the nurse that gave me the Viagra, she was self-proclaimed size queen, and she would only date men that had large penises.
Ted might have like upset some of the women listeners out there thinking, what a douchebag this guy is. But I mean, literally, there's women out there that are just as sexual and are so solely focused on sexual, exploration and satisfaction that It's just a human condition that some have different than others. No judgment.
Right. Maybe her first experience with sexual education was porn, and it set the bar pretty high for all the guys that had to have sex with her after that.
Crazy, crazy. Well, hey, Ted, I really want to thank you for being so transparent. Is there anything else you want to share with the people out there? I'm just thrilled that, first of all, your transparency and being open is where I'd love to see more men get. I want to be able to have dialogues with this. Matter of fact, I think I remember you saying to me when I told you I had an implant and we kind of went to that depth. I dropped my guard down. And I'll be honest, you're the kind of guy, and I've never told you this, so I hope you take this the right way. Back in the day, I could have never hung with a guy like you. Well, that's a weird term to use. But to associate with guys like you, I had to fucking lie my way through the night because, you talk about sexual experiences and, oh man, I did this and I did that. And I'm sitting here going, I can't even hardly ever get hard in the most sexual of situations. And I had to lie. To hang with someone like you or a group of men like you, I had to make up fucking bullshit stories. And I'd go home at night and just the man in the mirror moment, that night or the next morning, I was like, man, I don't feel good about all the shit I had to just throw out there. But I did it because, and then I got to the point where I isolated.
Well, and that's part of it is, we always think that how we think or how we respond is normal, and everyone has their own sense of what normal is. And, when I was younger and, my buddies would sit around telling, war stories or sex stories, whatever you want to call them, I had no idea that someone my age in their 20s or what have you, in their young teens, even when we were, my buddies in high school, we were sharing sex stories. I didn't know that somebody at that age could have erectile dysfunction. I thought it was strictly an age issue.
Famous misconception. I've talked to men in their 20s who have penile implants.
That is
in their 20s.
And that's great for them because, like you said, you didn't have that option when you were in your 20s. There weren't penile implants.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Well, there was actually I think it's in the late 70s is when they started actually doing the surgeries. But I mean, people didn't even talk about erectile dysfunction, let alone penile implants.
There was not the internet. You couldn't just go on and Google erectile dysfunction. There was nothing. I mean, you probably couldn't even look it up in an encyclopedia. You'd have to find a doctor.
And I've said this before on other with other guests. I hypersexualized myself because I was like, what in the hell is it going to take for me to really get hard? So I did some pretty crazy shit in my youth, trying, sexual stuff that I had no business being involved in, but I thought, I didn't know. I just thought, well, I just need to get more turned on.
Right. You were looking for that magic moment, that magic.
Yeah. What is it going to take?
Right. That magic aha moment, like, okay, bing.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. And then when porn did come out, I was like, okay, now here's some really explicit stuff, even masturbating and stuff. I wouldn't get hard. Or if I'd maybe get a semi, but it's like, so yeah, been a crazy ride. Well, Ted, we need to wrap this up. I really appreciate you coming and being on the show. And again, if anybody out there feels this really helps, be sure and share this. You can, I've got all my things at the sign off here of how you can get in touch with us. But Ted, I really, really want to thank you for being transparent. Men, I want to have more dialogues like this. Call in, email me, danielcanfield.com, and we'll make this happen. Ted, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, that's it for today. I'm totally spent, and people, I need to go take a nap. If you would like to call and leave a question or comment for the show, 405-592-6637. That's 405-59-BONER. You can find me on Facebook at Broken Boner Radio or danielcanfield.com, or you can even follow me on Twitter at RealBrokenBoner. I want to give a shout out to my production team at podcastfasttrack.com. Carrie, you know I couldn't do this without you. And I can't wait to talk more about my erectile dysfunction with all of you in future episodes. In the meantime, keep it real.